Hello and welcome back to Triple Intimidate. I'm your host Hayes,
And I am your co-host, Max.
and we want to introduce a very special third Intimidator, Pierre.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, Pierre. We're happy to have you.
Yes, we're very happy to have Pierre join us, the third Intimidator on our team. And we're going to start off this episode, which, by the way, is going to highlight all three of our top three cards, triple. We're cool like that.
Whoa.
Top three cards in the Dynasty set.
Right.
However, first, we're going to give Pierre a quick opportunity to introduce himself and tell you guys what he's all about and what his past experience with games are and how he got into Flesh and Blood.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I heard your guys' stories in the last episode. And I guess I'll just share a little quick funny story, actually. Similar to Max, I grew up playing some chess when I was a kid. I never went to tournaments or anything, but my dad taught me how to play. And I actually asked him this recently. I was like, Dad, we used to play so much chess and I loved it. And then all of a sudden we just stopped. Like, what happened? He's like, well, you kept on coming to me and be like, let's play, but this time don't hold back. Like, play as best as you can. And I just got sick of losing to like this 7-year-old kid trying my best that I could. And so yeah, apparently I was pretty good. Or maybe my dad was just really bad. One of the two. That was kind of like my first taste of games. I got into, I would say Catan was a pretty big gateway game. I played so much Catan in university, and some buddies and I forked out the $160 or whatever for a copy of Gloomhaven. So yeah, just a bunch of games, and then I remember Hayes was like, I forget where you were posting this, but some Facebook group or whatever, and just like, guys, come down to the lounge and check out this game. Like, it's Flesh and Blood. It's so cool. Blah blah blah. I was like, man, that does sound kind of cool, but like, I think I put him off for like a month before I actually came and checked out. But man, I was really hooked, and
Everyone gives in eventually.
yeah, everyone
I slowly wear people down until they have to play the game.
It's true.
Yeah,
It happened with
exactly.
me too.
Once you get
So I was gonna ask you, Pierre, what are your main decks in Flesh and Blood? What kind of heroes and what kind of classes do you like playing, and what do you find most interesting?
Yeah, I started the game off on Rhinar from the free intro decks or whatever, and it was a lot of fun. I liked Rhinar at first, playing some Brute, but then I forget how I got into Wizard, but just one day I was like, wait a second, I can play on your turn? That's cool. Got into that pretty heavily, and it's funny too because like I got into Wizard, and I'd say that around that point that's when I got like pretty serious into Flesh and Blood and was like researching, how to build a better deck, blah blah blah. And around that time I was like in a discussion group because I'm also a level 1 judge, as you guys probably know, and as our guests can hear about. I'm a level 1 judge, and I judged at our nationals, like our Canadian nationals, and we had like a Discord group in there, and all of those were Wizard mains. So apparently there's something between like knowing how a wizard works and having maybe more knowledge about the game, the nuances and the rules and whatnot. But
I mean,
yeah, those are my
you need to have a pretty good understanding of when you're allowed to be playing every card and how all of the interactions work. If you want to be playing Wizard, it's definitely one of the more complicated classes. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Pretty much as Wizard, you have to be able to explain to your opponent why you're allowed to do what you're doing. It's like you just have to go, bro. Trust me, I can do this. It's fine. I'm a level 1 judge.
Exactly.
Look over there while there's a unicorn. Exactly.
Well, who wants to get us started off with their number 3 most
I
favorite
will. I'll do
Or
it.
actually, hold up. Before we start, can we define for our viewers what we're actually ranking here? Are these the cards we think are the best in Dynasty, or the ones we're most excited about, or just our favorites?
Well, for me, it's that's kind of a good question. These 3 cards I think are just cool and add something interesting to the game. That's what I'll say.
Okay, for me, it's the 3 I'm most excited about.
Yeah, I
How
think I
about
got
you?
to side with Max.
I
These
think
are
that's pretty
three
similar to.
three that I'm most excited about, and they also happen to fall under Brute and Wizard. So maybe some of the cards that I'm looking more into versus other classes that I don't play. But
Fair enough. Well, Pierre, on that note, would you start us off with your number 3 card you're most excited for in Dynasty?
sure. Actually, probably one of the first cards that we even saw, because it was one of the armory cards. The Blessing of. Let me pull it up because I always forget. There's a
Blessing of
bunch of
Nether?
blessings. Yeah, Blessing of Aether. So many blessings in this set. But I think for Kano in particular, it really opens up that new archetype of like playing on my turn and not letting the crutch of like, oh, I'm about to lose the game. I gotta like kill you now. But actually
Yeah.
being proactive and playing on your turn. It also allows you to play Kano a bit more setup. Like, obviously, you need a turn cycle to set this thing up. But I think there's just some really cool things you can do with it. In Blitz, too, it's going to be nuts because you can, like, play it. In theory, you could play like a spell for 5. So, like a 2 for 5 on the next turn cycle. So, it's going to be 2 for 8. And then on your next turn, or sorry, on our next turn, on your opponent's turn, you could pop your Storm Striders and do another 6 damage with like an Emeritus Red or something.
Yeah, I agree. The only kind of negative thought I have about this card and some brief playtesting with it is it's another way to whiff. Like as Kano, it's cool
Yeah,
that there's this new archetype where I like to play on my turn, but ultimately my hero ability lets me kill you on your turn when you've overextended, and that's how Kano is always going to be played, right? And there's been a couple times where I've almost had the kill on my opponent, calculating that even if I hit a blue 0 for 1 zap kind of card, then I'll get my
yeah,
damage from Ether Wildfire and then Blazing Ether, and then I hit Blessing of Ether off the top, and it's like, oh, I just lost the game.
Yeah.
So it's that same kind of Eye of Ophidia problem. It's just one extra thing in your deck that will let you whiff off the top. But that being said, it's
yeah,
also a
for
very good
sure.
card to hit off the top if you're not trying to kill your opponent and are just trying to get more damage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also a huge enabler of all your surge effects if that's a deck
Yeah.
that you're running.
I think that's the major standout point for this card, just because I think Surge, on paper, like doesn't seem very great. For people who don't really know, Surge essentially, if a card does X arcane damage, Surge says if it does more than the printed cost, it gains some sort of effect. So right now, like before this card, that's pretty much like just Crucible of Aetherweave would buff stuff, right? Or like the
Or the
Inverse
gloves.
other way.
Foresight, yeah.
Whereas I think the blessing, and then even then, if they're using Crucible to buff it by 1 for the surge effect, defending that, I'm probably just gonna pay at minimum 1 just to stop that effect, right? Whereas with
Yeah.
Blessing of Aether in red, it gives it +3. Hopefully, I have AB3 to begin with, and then on top of that, like that's a lot of damage coming at me. So I think
Yeah.
the card's definitely tuned more towards Surge, but it's definitely interesting. I think it's a good pick.
Yeah, I'm
I
not
think
sure
this is a
how I
really
feel about. Sorry, go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Max.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. I was just saying, I'm not sure how I feel about Surge quite yet. Like, it seems like in theory a very good thing to have, but like the whole, say I present 6 damage, you only need to block whatever's on top of the base printed value. Like, I I can see when you're like pumping it with some like Aether Wildfire, it's gonna be huge. But just to have, 1, 2, or 3 is gonna be the typical buff. And most people are running AB3 nowadays.
Yeah, and I just think that like there's not enough stuff currently to like really push Surge over the edge. But
Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting thing to add into Wizard for sure.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you guys entirely. I think Surge is
Yeah.
awesome as it is right now, and this is a great segue into my third favorite card, or third card I'm most excited for in Dynasty, which is Ether Quickening, specifically red. Ether Quickening red is a 1-cost wizard action that reads deal 4 arcane damage to target hero, and it has Surge. If it deals more than 4 damage, it gains Go Again. And one thing I'd like to say is, as a wizard, I'm happy if my opponents are pulling out AB to stop something like a Surge effect. Like if I Ether Quickening and I get a blue out of their hand and it's like a Phi, that's just so good because their next turn is probably going to hurt a lot because they felt like they had to prevent my Go Again. So it's Ether Quickening red and all of these Surge effect cards are literally just better versions of the old cards. Like, do you remember Scalding Rain red? That's not really a thing anymore after Ether Quickening came out. Everybody's taking Ether Quickening. There's no downside to taking it. And I think it just kind of adds a little bit of consistency that Kano needs. And yeah, more incentive for opponents to block, which is a good thing, as well as the potential to get Go Again and do a double attack on your turn. I think Ether Quickening is kind of the best out of the upgraded cards, like thinking Sap, Prognosticate, whatever else. Those are my thoughts. What do you guys think about Ether Quickening?
Okay, I have a question about this card.
Yeah, what's up?
I do believe, let's say I'm Kano and I slap down an energy pot, okay, as my action. I then instant speed Kano off the top and play Ether Quickening, and I do 5 damage to you. It gains Go Again. I gain an action point, correct?
Correct.
Yes, as long as that's on your turn. If it's on their turn, you do not get your action point.
Yeah. I think that's what I think super rad, because you can be like, okay, I'll do an action, throw down an E-pot, whatever, and then instant speed this and get another action. And especially if you're playing against somebody who like isn't, they're like, oh, okay, fine, I'll take 5, and you're like, okay, well, I get an action point, I'm gonna hit you again, kind of thing. Yeah, I think this card's rad.
I just want to quickly go back to something Max said, like the whole 1-for-4 Scalding Rain being kind of the par for spell. I think it's cool that the Surge doesn't like hinder that, because when you look at Icelander's cards or fusion cards, I think LSS has treated it sort of like an additional cost, right? Like you need to fuse to get this additional benefit. So like the 0-for-3, 1-for-4, they're still there, but it's cool that this is like it's just straight up better than Scalding Rain. Like if Scalding Rain's a card you run, you just scrap it and put this in your deck instead, right?
Yeah, like Wizard didn't really get any, at least in my opinion. Maybe some crazy brainstorm build is going to come out, and maybe Blessing of Ether is going to like blow me away and be a super good card. But I don't really think Wizard got any crazy power cards in this set. But I do think that they got a lot of very important upgrades on cards that they already had running in their decks.
That's
even now, like I can run 12 blue 0-for-1 arcanes if I want. Like I can run Zap, Ether Dart, Prognosticate, and Sap. And that's not something I could do before. So I don't know. I just think I think these upgrades are very cool.
Yeah, totally.
Onto
Move
my
on to
number
Haze.
3. Different, enough of this wizard bullshit. I say, what's all this sorcery? Nothing's better than a good sword by your side, and that sword specifically is Dawnblade. My number 3 pick is Iron Song Pride. So this is a red 1-cost warrior instant and instant aura, and it reads: put a +1 counter on target sword you control. When Iron Song Pride leaves the arena, remove all +1 counters from swords you control. And at the beginning of your end phase, if a sword has not hit this turn, destroy Iron Song Pride. I like this card because Dorothea likes counters on her Dawnblade, and this is just another way to get counters on. Because it's an instant, you can even kind of like just play it as like an attack reaction. Like let's say I swing in for 3, you block 3, and be like, okay, instant speed, it has a +1 counter, take 1 kind of thing, as well as any other kind of reactions. The immediate downside is that when it leaves the arena, it removes all the counters, and if you haven't hit, you destroy it, which would trigger the losing counters things. So essentially, it reads like Dawnblade's ability in that if it doesn't hit in a turn, you lose all the counters. The only issue is if someone targets this aura and destroys it. Let's say I have 5 counters on Dawnblade and they destroy my aura. Those are all just instantly gone. However, I don't think that's something super to be worried about. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think this
Is it
card's
just
super
Runeblade
good.
that could target it?
Yeah, with Runic Reclamation, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to think.
Scour doesn't work because Scour is cost 0, is it not?
Cost 0.
Yeah,
Yeah, or
token.
token, but yeah.
Yeah,
0
so yeah. So I think it's just Runic Reclamation currently.
So
And
would
even
you
then,
sorry, Hayes, would you sideboard this in CC, do you think, against Runeblade, or would still run it maybe?
currently I would just mainboard it because like I don't think do many like Runeblades really run Runic Reclamation still in their
Not since
decks?
Prism Run.
That's what I'm thinking, and I don't think they would run that just against this card. We'll see kind of how the meta shifts, but I think this is kind of just a main board like all the time.
Yeah, I would agree with that probably.
Just because it's great, and even you can do like perfect world. Let's say I have the second turn, they swing at me, and I have 3 Iron Song Prides in hand and a blue. I'm just gonna tank all the damage. On their turn, instant speed, put 3 counters on Dawnblade and draw up, and then start swinging with the Dawnblade for 6. That probably won't happen, but the possibility's there, right? One other downside: this card doesn't block, which I just realized, which makes sense because it's instant. But whatever.
Instants don't block.
I think it's way more than good enough to warrant not having a block value on it. You know what I mean? Like I think
so.
the lack of block value will certainly hurt us sometimes, but I think it's more than good enough to be playable in a deck without having a block value.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Would you like to tell us your number 2 most excited card in Dynasty?
Sure. Before I do, could I go on like a really quick tangent? Because I'm curious to hear Hayes' opinion. So, Jubiel Spellbane. How do we feel about that?
Terrible card. You never run this.
Would you ever run it?
In Dorothea? No, never.
It's just it's bad.
Especially like, come on, like when it hits you. Well, okay. Let's say a word to run it. If I swing with this twice, because if I hit once with it, Dory lets me attack additional time. If I hit twice, then I get 2 Spellbane Aegis tokens, which will prevent 2. Wait, this is bad, terrible card. It's only against Arcane? No, never.
Also,
I think this card
when it hits, you get one of those Spellbane Aegis tokens only if you don't already have one.
No, bad, terrible. Like this should have been. If this was one-handed, cool, but it's not.
Yeah, it's pretty god awful.
If you don't already have one?
Yep.
You can only control one at a time. Yeah, it's stupid.
Okay, then it probably is bad. I was just going to say, Dory does have a lot of trouble into things like Kano, as far as I understand. So I think it's an interesting concept, like trying to give her some tools into Wizards, but
well,
if you can
that one Spellbane Aegis is going to stop your Surge from triggering, so that's something.
Well, I mean, also like on another Wildfire turn, if you do have a Spellbane Aegis, it'll prevent like at least 3 damage across the 3 attacks, right? So there's definitely some value, but only controlling one probably isn't good enough to make it a good weapon, even to board.
Oh, and what's interesting is you may destroy. So if your hero would be dealt arcane damage, you may destroy this, prevent 1 that damage. So it's not like
So it's like a permanent spell void 1 that you control.
Yeah.
It's like basically exactly what it is.
So it's interesting. I'd like to see other things give you these tokens because I feel like they're interesting for sure. But that's interesting. It's not an aura that gives you spell void 1. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, Pierre, what's your number 2 card?
I think my number 2. So this is getting more into the like what I'm excited for. So Berserk. That is a cool card.
Do you want to read what that does?
Yes,
for our
totally.
fans?
No, you should know what this does off the top of your head.
All the root players know what it does.
Until end of turn, whenever you discard a random card with 6 or more power, banish it. If you do, reveal the top card of your deck. If it has 6 or more power, draw a card. This is a yellow pitch majestic that costs 1. Has
It
go
has
again. Yep. So you play it, preferably in Levia. I think this would be a huge upgrade for Levia because she really struggles. If you're not building her with like a heavy blood debt, it's kind of like, here's my thing with Levi. You want to build her with really heavy blood debt, or you want to build her with no blood debt at all and just have like some power cards that she only has access to. I think this is sick. It could be pretty good in Rhinar, or I guess like in Blitz and KO as well, I think, but seems pretty insane.
I think this was super cool in tandem with a Blood Rush Bellow turn. Because hopefully it's Blood Rush, Berserk,
Oh
Blood
my
Rush Bellow.
goodness.
Draw 3.
I never thought of that. That's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, so it's you discard, banish a card, you reveal the top, it's 6 or more, you draw it, then you draw 2 off Blood Rush Bellow.
Oh,
now
wow.
you have a 3-card hand with
So and imagine the card you discard is Beast Within.
Yeah.
You know what? Side note, you know what's crazy is if you put a Beast Within in your arsenal, if you know you're going against someone with something like CNC Pummel, and then they CNC Pummel you, and you say, okay, I'll discard my arsenal. It's Beast Within, and then you draw back up. Anyways,
and
that's
then and then you discard a Beast Within from your hand off the pummel.
Oh, now you have a 5-card hand, and you only lost like 2 life.
Dude, that's like Crown of Providence. Crown of Providence, but better.
Yeah, except
one thing to note though is the card draw is not guaranteed because it is like an opt one on the top.
That is the downside to this.
Yeah.
Where I think you'd maybe need to tune a bit more towards this card and like not run as many pummels and stuff. But
so being the turn player, you run Berserk and Blood Rush Bellow, so they both trigger at the same time. So I think the play would be to draw your 2 cards from Blood Rush Bellow first, because then you're opting the top card, and if it's not a 6, at least you now know what that top card is. Versus I opt and then I draw into it. Now my opponent knows what one of my 2 cards
and
is.
I feel like too, if you look at the top and it's not let's say you look at the top and it's a pummel and you draw a pummel, and like with Blood Rush Bellow, you don't want to be drawing non-attacks and stuff. Like you want to draw into attacks, right? Because I've had terrible times where I've drawn into like 2 pummels on Blood Rush Bellow turn. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm swinging with Mandible Claws, which is still fine, but like you want to hit a solid attack, right?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
I think Berserk is a good addition to the kit. It's a good card.
Yeah, for sure. So my number 2 card is an assassin card that we talked about on our first episode called Eradicate. And
this is my number 2. This is my number 2. Okay,
we can talk about it together then, but I'll read the stats and you can give your thoughts on it. How about that, Hayes?
Sure.
It's a yellow cost. It's a yellow pitch card with 1 cost, and it reads when this hits a hero, banish the top X cards of their deck, where X is the damage dealt by Eradicate, and it does 4 damage and it blocks for 3. And it has a contract on it, which is mostly irrelevant unless you're playing against a Prism. But you're contracted to banish opponents' yellow cards, and whenever you do that, create a silver token. So why don't you give your thoughts on this real quick, Hayes?
This card is rad. I think it really encapsulates for me what Assassin does. I've had the opportunity to play Assassin once at an armory this past week. Not very fine-tuned. I didn't have all the cards. But Eradicate is awesome, especially because you can swing with, like, let's say Plunder the Poor, where that's you're contracted to banish cards that cost 1 or less. You give it go again, then you swing with Eradicate, and now you're looking for yellows and cards that cost 1 or less, or whatever contracts you have. And if you have, like, Cut to the Chase, Razor Reflex, whatever, sitting in Arsenal in your hand, you can buff the crap out of Eradicate and then banish even more cards. And I think the other day when I ran, I literally created 7 silver off this card, which is crazy. Yeah, you're not going to hit the yellow very often. I just think like if this had any other contract than yellow, this card would be bananas. And I think it's really good as is. It's a good finisher. Like I think if you only swing with Eradicate, it's fine. You really need another contract on the board to make it good. And I think going forward, once people figure stuff out, they're going to try and block this out. They're going to try and overblock this because you should really have some sort of buff to try and get as many cards off the top of the deck as possible. And even like in Blitz, if you hit them for 7, like let's say you raise a reflex this, that is almost a quarter of their deck gone. Which is crazy. So, if you're going for mill,
I have a little bit of a different opinion about this card than Hayes, which is that I think the silver creation potential on this card that Hayes kind of spoke to is very powerful. But the thing that pushes this card over the edge for me is the ability to banish something like upwards of 10 cards off your opponent's deck. And when I first read this card, I didn't really understand how powerful that was, but playing with it and playing against it, I've quickly realized that it's just insane. Because, for example, I was playing as Kano earlier today, actually, and on my first turn or turn 0, I did some good damage with like Ether Wildfire, Blazing Ether. So I had 2 of each of those left in my deck, which I kind of need to finish out the game. And then they swung only with Eradicate, not with the previous card with Contract, like Hayes said. They swung Eradicate with like 3 cards in hand and 1 in arsenal. And I my hand was looking good. I was ready to like combo off pretty soon. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna deal some damage on my turn and eat up this Eradicate. So they like cut to the chase red, cut to the chase red, cut to the chase yellow to buff it up by +8. Now Eradicate banishes 12 cards off the top of my deck. Not only does that create a ridiculous amount of silver, but it banished the other 2 Blazing Ethers and the other 2 Ether Wildfires, and suddenly all of my combo potential was dead, and I had lost the game. So I think this card is just, and it brought me closer to fatigue. But like the fact that it can trigger combos.
That's an interesting thing you bring up. That's one thing I keep having troubles wrapping my head around with Assassin, because it's like on paper it's like, okay, I want to make silver. Right? So it's like, okay, I'm going to try and like hit the cards that will get my contracts. I keep forgetting the fact too that like if you banish their cards, like they're gone out of the deck, right? Yeah. So if you take it, like when I ran this Eradicate, I hit like 2 Blood Rush Bellows against a Brute. That is insanely significant.
3 Artivores against Defy, the game's over. It's just pretty much
So I think that's where I'm kind of lacking in playing Assassin, is like I'm so focused on like, okay, I need to complete the contract. I'm not thinking about like, okay, let's get their good cards out of the deck. And I think like later on you're gonna see some very good Assassin players roll up. Just because even like someone was watching me and they're like, oh, like are you syncing all of their like cards with no block? And I'm like, oh my god, I should be doing that, because then when we get to later cycles, I can just hit them and they won't be able to block if I just keep syncing all their like items and stuff, right? And so like I think Assassin is just, it's gonna take some time to like figure out how to make it work. But yeah, I think you bring up a good point, and this is just good because if your opponent has less cards to play with, that is very good.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about this card here?
Yeah, I was gonna say this might be kind of like an early question, but I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts on what's the kind of sweet spot to be at for silver. Like, would you say 4 or 5? What's the point where you're like, okay, I'm naturally gonna gain a few silver and not really need to worry about it to pay for my boots and pay for my.
I think best case scenario, you want to be sitting around like 4 silver, just so that like you can get Black Tech Whisperers two turns in a row consecutively if you have no silver generation. But like you can get away with, like in theory, you can just swing with 2 contracts, swing with a contract, use Whispers, swing with another one, make both, and just keep feeding Whispers every turn. If you can make 2 silvers a turn, then you can just keep swing with 2 cards a turn.
I was playing against an Assassin as Azalea with a very red line deck, like Levi Rauch's deck from Battlehardened Columbus, where he got 3rd. And they took a completely different strategy because against Azalea, it kind of makes sense to block with a couple cards and push back with a couple cards because she kind of pushes you into that mid-range strategy. And I found they were actually using their silvers to use Mask of Perdition because I'm somebody that, as a ranger, can be fatigued out pretty easily. So they figured if I'm banishing 2 cards off the top of their deck with something like Leave No Witnesses, which it contracts them to banish red cards, not only am I getting my 2 silver back to re-equip Mask of Perdition, but I'm bringing them closer to fatigue. So I think as for the sweet spot, I'm not really sure, but I think it's very interesting that Mask of Perdition can just pay for itself essentially in silver if you banish 2 cards that complete a contract.
I'm not gonna lie, when Assassin first joined the game, I was like, man, I'm an Icelander main now. This is gonna be so easy. Like, I just block 2 cards anyways, block all their 4 or 5 attacks. And can I tell you, I've been so wrong on that. Like, Assassin is a huge threat to Icelander. I think maybe it's because when I first encountered it, it seemed to be people were learning it and didn't really know how to work. But it's like with Razor Reflexes too, like that's a generic. You just put that in your deck.
Yep.
Just hit on most of your cards if they only block for 6. Just pump it up.
Yes.
One more.
Yeah. Because everything's going to be pretty much 0-4. Only issue with Razor Reflex is it doesn't target Surgical Extraction, which made me really mad. But live and
That's
learn.
what Pummel's for. That's what Pummel's for.
That's true. Who needs Go again? Fine.
Hayes, you learned that in our practice game. Hey, you were like, wait a second.
I was like, oh no.
I knew what your mistake was too. I was looking at it. I was like, he wants to pump it. He can't pump it.
I was like, yikes.
So,
all right.
Side note.
On to
No. Quick side note. We need a quick side note. Why is Surgical Extraction like $40? Like, I guess it's the best of all the Assassin Majestics, but why is it specifically $40?
It's just overinflated right now. I don't think so. Because for everyone listening, this is like a week after Dynasty has been released, so prices are kind of just all over the place. I think because Surgical Extraction, I think, is one of the best cards, and I just think, dude, I don't know. I just think people are just throwing up a price.
Fair enough. All right,
just the fact that you're trying to actively banish blue cards just makes your opponent have less resources. Yep. And when you're playing a deck that like runs a lot of blue cards, that can be like, it's not super detrimental to have a few blues gone, but if you're like consistently taking a bunch of them out.
And I mean, in theory, like pretty much every deck runs red and blues, right? So like the red and the blue contracts are the best ones.
Unless you're playing Prism.
I don't think this card is valuable because of the contract written on it. I think it's valuable because of the bottom text, which says, when this hits a hero, banish the top card of their deck and look at their hand and banish a card. So it's like
get a bonus banish.
To put it in an Icelander perspective, this is like a fused Brain Freeze that you don't have to fuse, where you can target any card and not just 0 cost. Like, it's just so good.
That's fair.
I think the contract's good too.
I don't think it'll sit that high for long, but it is definitely a very good
if I open the Surgical Extraction right now, I think I would immediately sell it and then wait a month and buy 3 back for the same price.
Probably, yep.
So Pierre, what's your number one most card your most you know what I mean? What is it?
What is the best card printed in Flesh and Blood? Number 1
in Dynasty.
In Dynasty.
So I'm gonna bring up a card that I don't really understand fully what it does, but I know it's good. The Spirit of Irina, the new Bolton legendary.
Okay. Very interesting.
That thing's beast. Like, I don't really understand how Bolton works that great, but I do know Lumina Ascension is a powerhouse card, especially in decks that are like built around it. So let me figure out what Lumina does, but
I believe Lumina Ascension actually I don't know. I was gonna say it like gives your sword attack or something back again.
I think it's the one that this is a very heal.
Yeah, this is a big hole to go into because this is It's very interesting. Yeah, because I played into this the other night, and Lumina Ascension is it makes allows your swords to attack an additional time, and it
Yeah, so basically, here we go. It's until
yeah.
the end of turn, weapons you control gain +1, and if this hits, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a light card, put it into your hero's soul and gain a health. Otherwise, put it on the bottom of your deck. If you've charged this turn, you may attack an additional time with each weapon you control. Go again. It costs 0, and it's a yellow. So the point being, our item here. Where's my tab?
It lets you play Lumina Ascension as an instant. So this essentially turns the +1 on weapons into an attack reaction. So you can hit them when they're not expecting with it. It's also Spirit of Arena, whatever the heck. When it would be put into your soul, it goes to the arena. And as Bolton, you need to charge your soul, so things are going to your soul anyways. It is a 0 cost item, so you could just put it to the arena, but it's just like you would be charging with some card anyways. Instead, it goes to the arena, so you don't have to like pay with your action point to play it. And then it lets you not just play one Lumina Ascension at instant speed, but all 3 of them in your deck. So I almost wonder if this kind of paths the way for Bolton to pitch stack Lumina Ascensions and make sure he gets his Spirit of, I don't want to try to say this again, Arena out.
Arena, I believe.
And then after it's in the arena, play all 3 Lumina Ascensions at instant speed.
Playing into it, I need to find the card. You combo this in Lumina Ascension with
V of the Vanguard.
no, I think it's Beacon of Victory.
Okay.
Let me.
3 of us who don't play Bolton are like.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So Beacon of Victory is an attack reaction where it costs 0. As initial cost to play it, banish X cards from your hero's soul. X can't be 0. Target attack gains +X damage. If you've charged this turn, switch your deck for an action card with cost X or less. Reveal it. Put it to your hand. The shuffle your deck. You play Beacon of Victory. You grab Lumina Ascension and then play Lumina Ascension instant speed.
I see.
Which is the combo turn, and then you crack Courage of Bladehold, making your swords cost nothing, and hopefully you've played multiple Lumina Ascensions on the same turn, because then it lets you attack an additional time for each Lumina Ascension. So if you play all 3, your Centauri Sabers can swing so they can swing 4 times.
Hold up, I'm not a Bolton guy, but don't we run Duskbane?
Isn't Duskbane? Isn't that?
I mean, Raiden? No,
wait,
you do not.
Wait.
No.
Duskbane's the banned one.
No,
But
yes,
Duskbane can run Raiden.
You could run Raiden, but the thing is with Centauri Sabers, it's just more damage output because they get buffed by Lumina Ascension. Your weapons you control gain +1. So let's say you play all 3 Luminas. Now you're swinging for 5 for free, 4 times.
I see. So we're really building to this one combo turn with Courage of Bladehold.
It's literally just a 1-turn kill. Yeah. And then you gain a crap load of life because hopefully you're hitting nothing but light cards. And with Centauri Sabers, if it's blocked by an attack action, it gets +1 until the end of the turn. So if for some reason they block both of them, now they're swinging for 6 each time.
I kind of opened a Pandora's box by referring to this card, but the main reason I'm excited about it is it reminds me a lot of the Spellbound Creepers, where you can like activate it to gain an action point. Yeah, I think that's really cool.
I was not expecting
you're going to be excited about it until you play against it, and then you'll hate it. It's not fun.
Or maybe I'll build a Bolton deck. Who knows?
Maybe. Max, you want to talk about your number 1 pick?
Yeah,
number 1.
My number 1 pick, and this one I think
we
is like
might have the same pick again.
No, I don't think so. I think it's different this time.
Oh,
I'm actually positive it's different this time because my number 1 pick is a mechanologist card called Pulsewave Harpoon.
What?
Pulsewave Harpoon is red. It is 1 cost. It's red. It's 1 cost, and it says when this attacks a hero, they reveal X cards from their hand, where X is the number of times you've boosted this combat chain. Choose choose an action card with defense less than or equal to X, then add it to the chain link as a defending card. So it hits for 4 and it has boost. Why do I think this card is good? Because I think that Dash and Mechanologist as a class has a big problem, and it's aggro decks, specifically Fi. Dash has a really, really hard time racing Fi. And one thing that can kind of even out the matchup is if you can force Fi to block with a couple cards from his hand. That's why Combustible Courier Red is so good, because if he doesn't block with cards from his hand, you get the extra damage, and it incentivizes him too, because Dash blocks for 3. If we can play a more of a mid-range game plan against Fi, we're going to be doing a lot better, because we block 3 and he blocks 2. Now, Pulse Wave Harpoon, it doesn't just incentivize Fi to block, it actually forces him to block with a card we choose from his hand. So every time we play Pulse Wave Harpoon, we're significantly dampering a Fi turn that he was about to take after he didn't block at all. And I think that this might be exactly what we need to give us a little bit of an edge, or at least make our chances a lot better in the matchup against Fi and Briar and any kind of aggro deck like that. And I'm very excited to not go into that matchup and feel like I have no game plan at all. Pulse Wave Harpoon, I think, fixes some of the problems.
I think it's also like a really funny play if you can set it up with a couple of the T-bones, like a few T-bones, and put this on the end of the chain. Because then it's like, oh, I might have just sacked your Tunic, and then also give me a card from your hand.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyways, yeah, you guys seem surprised that I picked this. I thought this was a very highly rated card. I'm not.
Yeah, I was confused until you
it,
explained it, but now I think you got a solid point. I just anytime I've run into this, I find getting the 3 boosts can be a bit tough. And I mostly play decks that have 3 block. But you're definitely right, into heroes with 2 blocks. So Fi. This is super rad because you can grab like anything.
Yeah, and Pulse Wave Harpoon has boost itself, so like you don't have to have played 3 cards and then Pulse Wave Harpoon to see 3 cards. Like if you play 2 cards and then boost Pulse Wave Harpoon, you get to see 3 of the 4 cards in their hand.
You run it against other matchups, do you think?
Yes. Yes, I definitely do.
I'm thinking like it's still valuable information if you only boost twice and they show you like everything my hand blocks for 3, but then you know what those cards are too, right?
The only downside is that they reveal X cards and then you choose one with it. So like let's say you swing at me and I've got a route in hand and I only reveal 2. I'm not going to show you the route, right?
Yeah, of course.
So that's kind of the only downside is like let's say I have 1 2 block in hand. I'm not going to show you the 2 block, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of a thing that gets around it, but still, you're definitely right. Information's information.
Yeah, and the other thing that I just like to say is that it's almost a zipper hit. Zipper hit's 1 for 5 with boost, and this is 1 for 4 with boost. So we're losing 1 point of damage off of the zipper hits that we run in all matchups to get this extra effect that I think is really valuable.
Yep, that's fair.
Yeah. Maybe I wouldn't run it into Icelander, or if like I don't really know about I don't know. Maybe if I'm playing a hybrid dash list where I'm running like 3 induction chambers and 3 plasma purifiers, maybe this doesn't make it in because I'm not really boosting at all when I play that kind of game plan, because I have like Sync Blows and Unmovables and Fate for Scenes in my deck. So then maybe this gets cut and I just take the red zipper hits because I'm not boosting it anyways. So 1 for 5 is better than 1 for 4. But I don't know. Sometimes I do find myself boosting on hybrid dash, and I'll have to test it out. I need some more time with this card.
Very nice. Over to me to close this
out.
out.
Over to you.
My number 1 pick. Coolest card in the set, might be the coolest card in Flesh and Blood in my opinion, is Construct Nitro Mechanoid.
Oh.
This is a yellow Mechanologist action construct. It costs 4, and it reads: transform target Mechanologist head, chest, arms, legs, weapon, and 3 hyperdrivers you control into Nitro Mechanoid. If you don't, negate this. Go again. And then it flips on over to a Nitro Mechanoid Mechanologist weapon equipment item. And it states action, banish a card from under Nitro Mechanoid to attack. Attacks for 5. It has overpower, so it can't be defended with more than 1 action card, and it blocks for 5 as like an armor piece, and it has temper.
So
I don't have much.
How many cards start
8.
under Nitro Mechanoid? So you can attack with Nitro Mechanoid for free 8 times for 5 after you've set it up.
Yep. Yeah, because
And block
it's your
for-
weapon and 4 armor, and then 3 hyperdriver, so it's 8. Yeah.
And how much does it block? It blocks 15, right?
It's 5, 4,
3,
3,
and then 1 after you've done all your attacks.
5 factorial.
Yeah.
Have
So lots
not
of damage.
factorial. That does multiplication, right? 5.
It's exactly what you just did. It's you add up.
5 factorial. You multiply them all. That's 5 times 4 times 3. It's definitely not factorial. That would be a lot of block. But have you
I'm an
played
engineer. I know math things.
I promise you factorial isn't what you think it is.
Oh, you're probably right. I don't know how to do math, so don't listen to me.
And also it attacks for 6 because the only mechanologist arms is Galvanic Bender, which is a material that gives the permanents under +1 attack. So it really attacks for 6.
Until you banish Galvanic Bender, which will be the last attack. So it'll attack for 6, 7 times, and then 5 once, right?
That is correct. Yep.
Cool. So how about those
Brad?
drivers, Hayes? Do you have trouble? Have you played with this card? Because I've played a little bit with this card, and I find it very difficult to construct Nitro Mechanoid. I find it easy to pick up construct Nitro Mechanoid, but actually constructing it, now that's a whole different problem. How do you get 3 hyperdrivers into the arena without losing all of your health and the game in the process?
Be good, I guess.
That's helpful.
Pray. I think the thing is, like, I don't think you can really build a deck around this card. You kind of just need to play Dash normally, and if it just so happens that you can throw this card out, do it. And then you've got a pretty good chance of winning the game. Otherwise, I think it's just too tough.
In doing so, you need to build your deck with some, if not like many copies of Hyperdriver, which is not like a premium card in Dash.
No, it's not.
Still like I think what you do is you run Plasma Mainline as like your starting equipment. Plasma Mainline, whenever an item comes in, it costs 2 or less. You move one of the 5 steam counters from Plasma Mainline onto that thing. So your red hyperdrivers now have 4 counters, your yellow have 3, and your blue have 2. And then also you've got like Blessing of Ingenuity, which lets you grab 3 hyperdrivers from your graveyard or banish zone and bring them into the arena. So I think there's kind of ways around it. And even when I've been kind of playing around with this, I think running lots of hyperdrivers in Dash is also kind of just solid. Like having access to so much extra pitch on a turn just lets her kind of do a lot.
You're
the
wrong.
only downside, the only downside is I've played against a lot of people who they just boost away all their mechanoids, and it's like, well, that sucks. So like, I don't think you can't depend on Nitro Mechanoid to win you the game. But if the cards kind of if it works and you're able to get the right setup and you can play it, I think you have a very good chance of just winning.
When this card first came out, I saw the art and I was like, yep, this is a legendary. You can only include 1 in your deck. And it wasn't until like 3 or 4 days after I was like, wait a second, I can get 3 copies.
Yeah.
And I should get 3 copies if I was planning to play it, because exactly, you're gonna boost at least 1.
Yeah. And I mean, it pitches for 2, blocks 3. I mean, yeah, block with it if you have to. Dash can run on yellow pitch pretty well, so pitch 1 early on, get in your second cycle maybe. I don't know. I just think it's really cool. It's very flavorful, kind of like a mechanologist, going back to their workshop and like throwing all this random shit together and making a mech suit is super cool. I love it.
Stop attacking me. Let me build something to destroy you.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I want to say a couple more thoughts about this card, just because I have some extra thoughts. First thought is, I originally thought this card was going to be very, very strong in Control Dash, which, if you don't know, is the Dash list that doesn't boost, runs things like Findle, Fighting Spirit, Heart of Findle, even like Sigil of Solace, Healing Bomb, like just sustain life and set up pistols and attack your opponent. I thought we were going to be able
Literally
to
the
kind of-
worst deck to play against. It is
It's
so
not fun to
boring.
play against, but it's fun to
Oh,
play with, actually, I find.
maybe.
At least for
Maybe.
me. However, I realized kind of what this entailed. I thought we could use Blessing of Ingenuity to put the 3 hyperdrivers into our arena to then construct Nitro Mechanoid with our equipment that we've blocked with to kind of keep with our control game plan. But I realized if we're not boosting, we can't put hyperdrivers into our banish zone, and hyperdrivers don't block. So we can't put hyperdrivers into our graveyard, and the only way to get 3 hyperdrivers is to play them. So we actually need to be, and that's terrible. It doesn't have go again. It costs 1, and in Control Dash, nothing has go again because we're blocking with a couple cards, gaining some life, and swinging back for like 7 or whatever with a Findle's Fighting Spirit. Anyways, turns out this card is only going to be playable. This card, meaning Construct Nitro Mechanoid, is only going to be playable in Boost Heavy Dash, which may lose us some matchup points into things like Bravo, because we can't even play a hybrid game plan, really, if we're running like 9 hyperdrivers in our list, which is terrible. I'm not sold. I think maybe time will tell with this card, and there's going to be some spicy lists that come out that utilize it very well. But if we can't construct Nitro Mechanoid, and even then, if we can't construct it early, we're running things like what, like Jumpstart and like these new cards that are supposed to synergize with Hyperdriver, but really just work out to be worse zipper hits and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm not seeing it yet. I'll be convinced probably quickly when someone wins a big event with it, but definitely not yet. But it is very, very cool, and I'm curious to see what happens with it.
I think the thing for me that is telling me to not play this is like I'm very much the type of person when there's like a sweet combo, I'm like, okay, forget winning the game. I just want to get my mech out and win. And then in doing so, you're probably gonna lose. But like I think if you treat it as kind of Hayes said, like if I draw into it, the conditions all line up, sure, I'll play it. It'll be great. But
Like,
you don't play the game being like, okay, I need to put the mech on the table.
you
That's
can't
how I win the
you
game.
can't play Mechanoid as your win condition.
Correct.
I think you guys are wrong, because think about it this way. Dash right now loses into Phi. What we're doing when we add
Does
construct
Dash lose into Phi?
Yes, she does.
What
That's
kind of Dash are you playing?
Boost hybrid Dash, and it certainly loses into Phi. That's a fact. It has a bad matchup into Phi.
Sorry, no. Sorry, it's not Dash loses into Phi. It's Max loses into Phi, is what you're saying.
As that, I don't know. I watched some Flesh and Blood YouTube. This is general consensus. Dash is bad into aggro, specifically Phi. Now, what we're doing,
all you triple intimidators, vote now. Does Dash lose into Phi?
Let me finish my thought. If you add Nitro Mechanoid into your deck list, regardless of whether it's your win condition or not, you have to build your deck around it. You have to add in the hyperdrivers. You have to add in the Blessing of Ingenuities. And if you don't end up constructing Nitro Mechanoid, you've just made your deck list worse and given yourself even a worse matchup into Phi. Like when I play a Nitro Mechanoid Dash list, the only way I'm going to win the game against something like Phi is by constructing Nitro Mechanoid early. I think that's just a fact. And then the other thing is, we already have winning matchups into things like Bravo and maybe even Oldham with the heavy control pistol, or like we set up our induction chambers, we set up our plasma purifiers. Now we're putting out 15 damage every turn for 2 cards. Like if you can just kind of sustain and block and attack against them, you have a winning matchup right now. And I don't think Nitro Mechanoid necessarily helps that matchup. So you have to set it up very, very early to get any kind of value out of it, I think. I don't know. These are my thoughts. Silence.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's a good
points,
or not. But I
don't know too much about Dash, to be honest. I don't know too much about Phi either, so I'm gonna leave this in your hands. And for the testing to prove you either wrong or correct.
Fair enough.
I think this card's just cool as hell.
That's true.
It's got a pretty picture. That's actually how I rated all my cards. What cards have the prettiest picture in this set?
Fair enough. I just don't understand why it had to be 3 hyperdrivers, you know? Like if it wasn't 3 hyperdrivers and the stats on it were a little bit worse, it would be
They should have made it has to be 1 powder keg, 1 hyperdriver, 1 Teklo core. Would that have been better?
Teklo core is tough because they only last for 2 turns,
exactly.
Right? Regardless of what you do. So I don't know. I just think 3 hyperdrivers. That's a lot of hyperdrivers to have to turn into nitromechanoid. But we'll see. We'll see. Does anybody have any final thoughts before we close out our episode?
No.
Oh, I guess we should probably tell you guys why our podcast is named Triple Intimidate.
Oh, no. Next week.
Oh,
That's
okay.
all. That's all for this week, everybody. Thank you for listening again to Triple Intimidate. We will catch you next time. Goodbye.